Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at BTV World. And today's show we will be taking a look at two very important topics. The first is in reference to the National Security Committee meeting, in which of course a number of important issues were discussed. This is of course a continuation of the earlier meeting as well that was held, and with regards to of course the kind of spike in terrorist activities that we've seen, it seemed that this was a necessary meeting that was there after many embassies also issued advisories with regards to the security concerns, especially after we saw terrorist attacks in Bannu as well, and an attempt also being made in Islamabad, which was thwarted thanks to, of course, a policeman and that, of course, sacrificed his life in order to save many others. But unfortunately, of course, this is something that we've seen come back to Pakistan after a very, very long time, and especially in the aftermath of the US troop withdrawal. There was always a spike and a potential threat from these terrorist activities and these terrorist groups regrouping within the country as well. And then, of course, this is also something that when we speak about with regards to the involvement of the Afghan Taliban regime, it's also important to understand that their particular soil should not be used against any other territory, especially Pakistan as well, which is, of course, something that has been reiterated by the country many times before, and especially also with regards to our ability to be able to counter concerns with regards to terrorist activities in Pakistan, and especially our interactions with the TTP. We've also, of course, tried to incorporate the Afghan Taliban regime within Afghanistan within this, but unfortunately we haven't seen much work done, especially in terms of protecting the country from Afghanistan soil being used against it, and then also with regards to cross-border movement and terrorist activities, to which of course there was also a mention which perhaps wasn't taken too well by the Afghan Taliban regime, that was stated by the Interior Minister, saying of course that there will be action taken across the border against the TTP within Afghanistan as well, that are using that as a safe haven, which was termed as provocative by the Afghan Taliban, and something that was also baseless according to them. But of course, in terms of where we stand today, the kind of security challenges that are there are, of course, ever present and an important aspect of this meeting. But what's important also is that the economic security concerns were also discussed, and the Prime Minister emphasized on the economic roadmap that is the need of the hour and needs to be developed as a way forward, and for, of course, enhancing the country's ability towards economic progress and to be able to protect us from the kind of challenges that we face today in the future as well. So that, of course, was another important aspect that was discussed. We'll take a look at both of these issues in detail in our first segment of the show. In our next one, we're going to take a look at what has happened with regards to the kind of concerns that have been shared by a number of top actresses and models, especially Ms. Kubra Khan, who has talked about the video that was earlier circulated by Mr. Adil Raja, in which he claimed that top 4 models had affiliations with the top brass of the military. And because of this, of course, there is much controversy around social media as to who can say what and also be able to get away with it. Something, of course, that is now being raised, voices are being raised against. And then we, of course, saw the tweets by Kubra Khan as well as other actresses who've come up with regards to such baseless allegations, and talked about how this is not something that they're going to take easy, and that there is going to be a consequence for it. Ms. Kubra, in her tweet specifically, has also given a time frame in which she expects a public apology, or there will be a case of defamation that is going to be then proceeded with against Mr. Adil Raja. What exactly, of course, is going to be the future of such a case, and how exactly such cases do eventually pan out, is, of course, one of the aspects that we'll talk about, but also in terms of social media and the kind of accountability that needs to exist and how to go about it. That's another aspect that we're going to be talking about at the end of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farooq Batafi, and we've also been joined in the studios by a special guest with us, Mr. Sarfaraz Ahmed Rana, who's a security analyst, has joined us in the studios. Thank you very much, Mr. Sarfaraz, for joining us and being a part of the debate. We've also been joined online by Dr. Qamar Chima, who's a foreign affairs expert. Thank you very much, Qamar Sahab, for joining us and being a part of the debate. Let me start with you, Mr. Sarfaraz Ahmed, considering, of course, that the National Security Committee meeting is an important one, and especially in the light of the recent terrorist attacks that we have seen and the potential rising, of course, there is a lot of concern as to a repeat of history and how, of course, initially we were dealing with terrorist incidents quite often. And of course, there have been massive sacrifices in the aftermath of such activity that we've given in, and we've had relative peace in the country, but especially since the US troop withdrawal and of course the Afghan Taliban regime in Afghanistan, there was always a potential of this happening within the country. And now that we're here, what sort of discussion do you think is important? Because what has been emphasized, of course, is the fact that there will be a zero tolerance towards terrorist activities and terrorist groups, that there is a resolve. But these aspects, of course, have been there, and we have seen that in terms of the kind of strategy that has been put forward, it has always been based on the fact that this is something that Pakistan is not going to have any tolerance against. But where do you think is a re-evaluation needed, and where do you think that, considering the kind of threat that exists today, Pakistan really needs to think deeper?
First of all, thank you for having me, Sana. Secondly, it seems that the gains Pakistan have gained throughout that war on terror, it seems that Pakistan is now losing those gains, of course, against those the same people. And secondly, as you mentioned about the policy statements, policy statements alone are not sufficient. Of course, that some policy actions, and then policy action, policy strategy, and then of course the execution and effective execution is needed here. And of course, the action plan, national action plan is also there to guide us and to guide Pakistan's policy and Pakistan's new approach. But one thing which is very important for us to understand, that this time their approach is going to be very tough. Why? Because they have now legacy and a few claims that they have defeated one of the largest great power in the world, America, and how we had seen the last shameful flight that America left. So now, of course, there is something for them to celebrate and to cherish. And of course, they are now posing a great challenge to Pakistan, and we have seen the new wave of terrorism in Pakistan. And of course, there are a lot of apologists and sympathizers in Pakistan. What I consider is that Pakistan should not be concerned about what is happening cross-border, but Pakistan should also be concerned about what is happening within Pakistan. Why? Because a lot of apologists and a lot of sympathizers in Pakistan. And also at the same time keeping the current and the given political polarization in Pakistan, economic instability, and according to NADRA data, more than 60% of Pakistan's population is youth. So that can easily be used and exploited for them. So of course, a policy action is needed, policy national consensus is needed, and as you said, zero tolerance. Sometimes we say something, we do something, right? So there is not even a coherence in our action and whatever we say. So this time there must be a concrete approach, there must be a policy approach, and we should see some, effective thing. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So you think in the past there hasn't been zero tolerance?
I believe that state somehow that we see that some good Taliban and bad Taliban, that state has been playing like this, right? So I mean, terrorists are terrorists, extremists are extremists, fundamentalists are fundamentalists. I mean, what is that good or bad?
So there's no distinction.
No distinction. Yeah. So when you say that good and bad, now who is good and bad? Tell me. I mean, yesterday those who were good, now they are becoming bad towards you now. So now you are calling them that all are bad. So I mean, this should be
right, and that's important, and we'll talk more about that for sure. Cheema Saab, considering, of course, that the kind of actions that we're looking forward, especially in terms of the statements coming in from the Prime Minister towards zero tolerance, as well as the kind of action that is needed, that's of course important. But in terms of the way forward, in terms of how we're going to be dealing with issues, how do you think that the role of the Afghan Taliban is going to be taken into account? Because so far, of course, we've seen that in the past there hasn't been much that has been contributed towards the conversation, and also in terms of course, the kind of threats that exist, the kind of border management that is there, and of course the fact that perhaps there are issues of the will or capacity within Afghanistan to be able to deal with such threats. So are we planning forward devoid of any help or facilitation from the Afghan Taliban regime, or are we still counting on them on certain aspects?
Thank you very much, Sana, and it's really great, and I'm so happy to see Sarfaraz here. Sarfaraz is my student, and he has been one of the excellent students, and it's really happy to be here at this platform.
Thank you,
Moving
Hosam.
forward with
Thank
the
you.
question, I think Safraz has mentioned and raised some certain wonderful points. The important thing is that why we are just talking on this issue again and again. Every time a Pakistani, the leadership in Pakistan is just talking on the same issues after every 3 years, 4 years. Why is this happening? Why there is no concrete approach to such kind of challenges? Why the political leadership, the unelected institutions, why they don't sit together and once for all decide that? Why we are just talking that okay, yes, in the last year more than 280 people from the security forces have been killed by the terrorist organizations. Were we thinking that the uh, from 2015 to 2020 we have seen that the violence was reduced and the law enforcement agencies, they were very much successful in eliminating the terrorism. How come they have been in our place again? So these are certain uncomfortable questions maybe we have to ask. But unfortunately, Pakistan's political elite is silent on all that. The parliament, there is no discussion in the parliament even. So right now, when the Americans and everyone left Afghanistan, we are just fighting the terrorists and militants after everyone left the Afghanistan. So we were considering the Afghan Taliban, when they will come in power, everything will be okay, and we will be just having a kind of an apparatus which we actually needed. But we have realized that the Afghan Taliban, they are not what we were expecting. So they are trying to work with the Indians for the capacity building of their troops. They are getting money from Indians for their development, which although they have not been recognized by any country, but every country has a right to develop relations. But we have to review our last 40, 50 years policy towards Afghanistan. And for God's sake, we need to make it to public. The public doesn't understand that there is a war fatigue as well. The soldiers, the public, everybody is just trying to understand. We have had more than 30 million people been affected by the floods, and we are expecting another urban guerrilla warfare which is on the grounds. So we have to see, the people have to see. And then the China Pakistan economic corridor that brought massive foreign direct investment, that is even facing challenges. So I think until and unless the political class, all stakeholders, they don't sit together, which the army chief recently raised in Karachi, if all stakeholders, they don't sit together and they don't chalk out a plan. Because the problem is, the politicians believe that this when it comes to the security, when it comes to fighting terrorists, that is the domain of the military, and the military wants that there should be a civilian face to their policies. So this is something, there should be a broader discussion. For example, the militants are being targeting the law enforcement agencies. There is no discussion from the political class. Imran Khan, former Prime Minister Imran Khan, is not speaking a single word, because he understands that there is a this 2023 is an election year, and we need to keep our people, we need to keep up our politicians and public safe from the militant. So the politicians are backtracking, and only the law enforcement agencies and the military, they are there. So there are questions that why counterterrorism department, they are not even that capable enough to deal with the militants. There are questions that why the committees at the provincial levels, they were not working properly, and why we realize that there is no need of that. So I think there are certain uncomfortable questions we need to answer, and we cannot have the answer unless there is a complete political class come in the parliament. They don't talk to each other. And here we have to ask our unelected institutions that how come all this, the resurgence of terrorism is there, how the TTP is getting closer with the Baloch separatists who are challenging the state, why the entire CPEC projects are getting compromised. We need certain basic questions, answer of certain basic questions. But unfortunately, since the political class is not resolving their disputes, or not even coming to the parliament to talk what they need, so how come we can have the answer? So the people really need answer. Recently we saw, as Sarfraz was mentioning, the data is coming. The Nadra says 65% youth is in the country. The people are fleeing the country because at the end of the day they believe that they deserve much better. So I think here the political class need to come forward, and they need to give the answers. They should stand in the parliament, they should raise a political consensus. And that's why we have a potential, we have a youth, we have people, we have everything. All what we need is to sit together and plan for another 20 years, that what this nation needs. It's about, we have crossed 75 years of, the nation's life has been there. So how to move forward and how to plan another 25 years. The political class should have a political and economic consensus, and there should be political reconciliation among the political quarters as well. That is what a nation needs. The nation needs to heal, and only the political class, they can make it happen. If they won't sit together, everybody is going to take advantage, and so we are
Right.
seeing what's happening.
Right, absolutely. And Shibasab, a number of important issues that have been raised, and Farooq, I'm sure you have much to respond to, but I also want to talk about specifically the issue regarding civil and military that was highlighted, and especially in terms of the way that this particular issue is viewed in terms of who needs to be at the front to respond to this particular threat, and of course there are different aspects of both that are involved in. But is there perhaps something that is missing in terms of the alignment, or is there perhaps something that needs to be done at both fronts to be able to equip us better with the ability to tackle with this threat?
Right, Sana. Number one, deja vu. Number two, let me be the devil's advocate at the very start, because usually talking about politicians and the parliament is part of our national habit as well. We keep on complaining. I've been critical of the parliament, but let me be very clear. When you talk about this parliament, it is the softest target possible when you talk about terrorism. So don't expect any fireworks coming from the Parliament of Pakistan. One, because politicians are politicians and they are vulnerable. They are civilians, right? They don't actually, with the exception of cabinet members and the leader of opposition and the leader of executive, people don't roam about in fortified vehicles or reinforced. They don't live in reinforced houses. So it is natural that your parliament will not be able to take that much responsibility. It has been happening. If you remember, when Imran Khan Sahib was Prime Minister, and they had this bright idea that the issue of forgiving terrorists should be taken to Parliament. If you recall, I kept on fighting that idea tooth and nail. And that actually had a physical toll on me as well, but I kept on doing it. Why? Because I know how this parliament works, and I know how weak they are when it comes to, parliamentarians are killed by terrorists. This very same parliament cannot stand up and offer a fatwa for their own slain, members. What are you talking about right now? I've been saying this for quite some time, that we have to understand the nature of the beast, and I'm talking about terrorism. So the nature of beast is such that it is kinetic. It is going to impact you physically, and it is going to attack you physically. So who responds to it? People who are law enforcement and people who have military skills. So it becomes natural and essential that it will have to be led by the military flank, right? And this is the biggest problem. Remember, 10 years ago when I joined PTV, there was such a situation that we could not sit on television. We were told, as a matter of policy, you cannot call your own slain soldiers martyrs. You cannot call the terrorists by the word terrorist. And I kept on defying it. I used to carry a designation letter in this pocket. That is a different story. But today, if you talk about the possibility or the impact, I think that we have the kind of consensus that now terrorists are enemies, despite all the apologists that Rana Sahib was talking about. They are apologists and they are everywhere. Let me give you an anecdote as well. When 2014, 16 December happened, when APS Peshawar was attacked, I was actually already building the case against terrorism, and I thought that now, because we all were shaken, right? This time we are not going to drop ball, and we are going to keep on talking about this. Incidentally, that was the time when Charlie Hebdo also happened. And a bunch of politicians, a bunch of senators and lawmakers actually took out a procession against that. I used to do an Urdu program. I was told that you are not going to touch, APS Peshawar, and you're going to talk about Charlie Hebdo, and look what a great tragedy that is. And I said, excuse me, I will talk about that as well because I'm part of this culture, I'm part of this religion, but we have to talk about APS Peshawar. That was the time when I actually first used that designation as well, and finally we were given the chance. So right now, I think things are far better. Apologists are there. For example, Imran Khan Sahib keeps on giving interviews, and remarkable that our media doesn't even confront him. He is talking about thousands of people, his plan to resettle thousands of unsubdued terrorists back in Pakistan. Why is it that? Nobody has asked him, what did you want to achieve out of this? Sana, at this moment also, many of us keep on getting threats, but now, thanks to our armed forces, things are better. Let us go back to National Election Plan because that was great. We keep on talking about need for consensus. The consensus is there in 2014. After that, I understand many people had relapse. But if they did, if 80,000 dead bodies could not change your resolve to placate terrorists, then nothing is going to. So this idea of building national consensus is overrated. There are 13 parties in the government. They are major parties of the country. I think they are okay when they have agreed to support the NSC's findings or their recommendations. I think that national consensus has been built. Let us charge ahead and get rid of this menace for once and all.
All right. Cheema Sahib, you have earlier mentioned this aspect that why do we keep revisiting this. So I'd like you to comment also on the fact that when we talk about consensus and we having that as a baseline, why do we need to do that in the first place if we already have had that in the past? But also add to that the issue when we talk about dealing with terrorist groups, particularly the TTP as well. We have, of course, attempted to have dialogue with them, and we have tried to, of course, engage in a different manner, but that hasn't really panned out well in terms of any positive development or any sort of compromise that perhaps has reached where we could say that we've had any sort of progress with them. And so do you think that this approach can now be abandoned altogether in the future, that we don't have space for dialogue at all, and whether or not that is going to help, and especially with regards to what Sarfraz Sahib earlier mentioned in terms of the distinction being made in terms of good or bad Taliban, whether or not we're making any distinction towards our approach with different groups?
Well, I think there are 3 points. First of all, I think I don't understand what kind of a political consensus we have in the country when Pakistan's former prime minister, while standing in the parliament, was saying that Osama bin Laden is martyred. Pakistan's former foreign minister was saying that let's avoid this question whether Osama bin Laden is martyred or killed. So I think these are some very uncomfortable questions for the political class, but they give a clarity to the people that where the political class stand. The second, as far as the question of dialogue is concerned, I think I don't have exact understanding, but I don't have an exact answer for that whether the Afghan Taliban asked Pakistan that we should talk to TTP or not, or whether it was a decision of our own leadership, security leadership, to take this decision. But since the ownership is always need to come from the political class, I remember Bilawal Bhutto Zardari wanted to have a civilian ownership of that dialogue, and they wanted to have a cabinet or the parliamentary oversight on that, but unfortunately it couldn't happen, and then we are fighting with this mess. At the end of the day, we just cannot go for having talks with these militants and terrorists. There are serious ideological differences, and the kind of approach they have, we just can't accept that. So at the end of the day, the state, society, people, everybody have to eliminate them from scratch. That's the only way. Or either we accept them. If the former army chief of Pakistan said that the monopoly over violence lies only with the state, then it is the state that has to determine. And at the end of the day, we just can't let Afghan Taliban to host TTP. I think here my submission is the Pakistan's political class need to talk to the OIC, to the Muslim leadership, international leadership that Afghanistan is hosting Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is a globally designated terrorist organization. But obviously, Pakistan is all uncomfortable sharing all that because it is Pakistan who have been taking Afghan Taliban to Doha, Qatar, and making all these discussions possible between the West and the Taliban. So obviously, we are still trying to figure out that what kind of approach we need to take. But obviously, we have decided that we are not going to talk to the TTP and we are going to talk to the Afghan Taliban since they are hosting, although they don't accept it. But I think this is going to be a very difficult understanding. Remember, we have seen an influx from Afghanistan. We are seeing that some dollars every day they are moving by a gray market or black market from Pakistan to Afghanistan. We have to deal this mess very carefully and seriously and once for all, because the state society doesn't have that appetite. The world is moving forward, and we are just dealing with this terrorism and non-state actors for since last 20 years. The West world left Afghanistan. We are still stuck there. We are in Afghanistan still 1970s, 80s when there was a Cold War. We are still there. Afghanistan is Pakistan's reference points globally. We need to change this approach if we really want 65% of Pakistani youth to have a future.
Right, absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. Qamar Cheema, for being a part of the discussion and sharing your views with us. Sarfaraz Saab, considering, of course, the discussion that we've had so far, and also in terms of what has been said, it seems that perhaps there is still a lot more that needs to be decided in terms of how we're going to approach this particular threat and how we're going to deal with terrorist groups such as the TTP. And there may be, of course, a resolve, as has been shared, but in terms of the approach, are there still perhaps different ways that we're considering? And then moving forward, if we're only going to look at, of course, the situation within our own borders as well, how exactly do you think there can be increased coordination both within the civil and military leadership, and then, of course, within the provinces as well? As Cheema Saab earlier mentioned, the different counterterrorism departments, often we hear that there is, of course, a huge lack of information sharing or even coordination at a level that perhaps when we talk about a national response needs to exist in order for us to have that sort of national response on ground as well. How can we change that?
Of course, first of all, as I would like to respond to the Cheema Saab and Pitafi Saab views about allowing the safe havens in Afghanistan. First we need to see that why they fought 20 years war of two decades in the first place. They fought a war. Why? Because America asked them to hand over the people who were responsible are behind the 9/11 September 11 attacks. So they have not just refused, but they also allowed them the safe havens. And then there was a war for two decades or 20 years, and they have not handed over to the United States of America, and they faced 20 years of war. Secondly, as far as the way forward or solution is concerned, of course, first of all, repeatedly being said that Pakistan has to put its own house in order. There is no way. There is one study I was going through. According to the study, that Pakistan has lost $200 billion in the last 20 years in this so-called war on terror. First of all. Secondly, 80,000 human loss. We have lost our Jawan, our officers, our people in this war on terror. So do we have a choice? First of all, we do not have a choice. We have to build a national consensus to fight against this very cancer or very menace. And we have to respond, prepare a very, very tough response against them. Secondly, of course, Pakistan, all the problems starts from the economic crisis. Pakistan does not have a sound economy. Pakistan, in fact, does not have any economy. So Pakistan has to focus, on economic side, so Pakistan can build its economy and economic base, so we can at least become a self-sufficient, and we can engage our youth, and we can provide the better opportunities. We can create a very amicable environment within the border. Secondly, the political polarization, because I do not know that which political party does not lose their people in this war on terror. For example, Mohtarma Bibi Shahid, Muslim League, and ANP. I mean, you just name one political party. Every political party has been a victim of this terrorism. So they have to build the consensus, and of course, given the situation, they have to build a political consensus and they have to somehow address this political polarization and political divide currently going on in Pakistan between, over the petty issues in Pakistan. And secondly, of course, we have to introduce a youth engagement policy. That is very important. Have you seen the scenes previously yesterday in the sports complex? 1,600 jobs and more than 40,000 young people, they went there, to apply for the jobs. You just see that how youth is vulnerable in Pakistan. And do we have any engagement policy to engage the youth effectively? And so, of course, there is another issue that we have to have a policy to engage youth effectively, sooner the better. And also, of course, I do not see that, we have seen in the previous elections that one political party, TLP, has secured more than 6 million votes. That means their political and social base has been increasing. Who is allowing them this political and social base? The state of Pakistan. So state of Pakistan also has to reorient and reassess their policies. And this, this so-called approach of good Taliban or bad Taliban is basically hurting and coming to haunt Pakistan. So, of course, that is another important point that Pakistan has to consider.
Right.
State of Pakistan has to consider, yeah.
Absolutely. We're short on time, so we're going to conclude the segment, but Farrukh, anything you'd like to add before that?
Right. Sarfraz actually mentioned that I perhaps said something about Afghanistan. So far, I haven't. And boy, don't get me started. Regarding what Afghanistan is, recently there was a statement coming that came from our interior minister, who was complaining about safe havens in Afghanistan, and then we saw a barrage of weird and stupid statements coming from Afghan authorities and their puppets on social media. Somebody is actually trying to remind us of East Pakistan, somebody else is doing something else. Look, buddy, let me just paraphrase what I've heard. We don't need to actually invade Afghanistan. We don't need to shoot a single fire inside Afghanistan. Pakistan has a truckload of levers to control what is going on in Afghanistan. And trust me, if Pakistan is not on your good side, your own people are going to tear you limb from limb. So stop reminding us of these stupid things and do something about the promises that you made to us regarding your land not being used against Pakistan. Having said that, let me also point out, all these youth policies and all these issues are long-term issues that are there. But at this moment, you have to fight terrorism, because without culling the terrorist squads and groups, you cannot have peace. And the kind of reversals that we have seen during last year of Imran Khan Sahab was really terrifying. We keep on talking about how FATA was integrated into Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. When you remove all the pickets and you allow them to dismantle the security fence on our border, you have practically reversed the FATA reforms already, albeit it is a soft reversal. So somebody needs to answer for that as well, and you have to start anew. And I assure you, I know my heroes, my friends, my soldiers, my law enforcement agency people. Last time a terrorist tried to infiltrate Pakistan, Islamabad with suicide bombing. And our policeman, an ordinary policeman, actually stopped him there and sacrificed his own life. So this country is a country that knows what it's talking about. And if those apologists are not given any voice once again, I assure you we can get rid of this problem. Afghanistan again is a problem regarding economy. Let me tell you, there has been so much flooding of Pakistani dollars, American dollars in Pakistan to Afghanistan, that today Afghanistan's currency is more stable than ours. Just close these loopholes. Your wheat is going there, your meat is going there, your salt is going there. Stop that and see the other side cry. If you do that, you can force them to compromise on all the things that they are saying. But remember, ideologically, they are TTP's twins. And apologists, no matter where they come from, they will keep on telling you that there is a distinction, there is a difference. Sarfraz was also talking about that.
Yes.
The problem is it is a distinction without a difference. There is a title, they have different titles, but they have the same worldview. And I know religious law so enough that I can tell you with surety that if our Maulana took so much time, 10 years or more, to actually declare suicide bombing haram, despite the fact when
something wrong.
Quran is clear about suicide,
Yeah.
then imagine that their lot. Why would the Afghan Taliban or Pakistani Taliban think that terrorism is not part of a policy
Yes.
solution? So you'll have to fight all these agents of destruction, and we are fighting for civilization. We are the good guys. Keep on fighting.
Sana, I would like to add one thing here. That,
Very
you know,
quickly, we hardly
yeah,
have
very
time.
quickly,
Yes.
very quickly. That Pakistan has to become, of course, a modern, secular, and progressive state. So, given this future or the vision, Pakistan has to, to pick between medieval or Stone Age mindset and modern mindset. This current mindset which is prevailing in in Afghanistan, that is medieval or Stone Age mindset, there is no future of Afghanistan under the current political setup.
Right, absolutely. Thank you very much, Sarfraz, for joining us and being a part of the debate. We'll take a short break here before we move on to the next segment. Welcome back to the debate. We're now going to be taking a look at what is spreading around social media, so controversy between Mr. Adil Raja and a number of female models and actresses, particularly Ms. Kubra Khan, who's talked about how she is going to be filing a defamation suit against Mr. Adil Raja based on a video that was earlier released in which he has talked about 4 top models and taken their initials and said that there is some sort of affiliation between them and the top brass of the military. And of course, this is putting in a lot of debate and question around what anybody can say on social media without any evidence, and anybody and everybody is a point where people can pass comments on and put on any number of allegations without any consequence, which is of course something that perhaps will be changed if more and more people raise their voice, like Kubra, who has raised this particular issue and has asked for a public apology. And if that's not there, then of course she will be filing a defamation suit. And then, considering of course these issues, we're going to be taking a look at what this means in the larger context of the way social media is run and what sort of accountability can or possibly exist. Farooq, considering of course that especially when we talk about social media and we talk about allegations that are put forward, especially on females within the country, there is of course a lot that is accepted without any real deconstruction or trying to figure out what really has happened or whether or not any evidence has been provided. And because of that, there is a lot that is a lot of damage that is incurred. But again, the kind of accountability that we've seen in the past, particularly in social media, is perhaps also hard and perhaps also something that isn't looked upon much. How exactly do we proceed with such issues, considering of course that we don't really have much of a regulation around these issues?
Right, Sana. I think Pakistan has all the ample regulations that are needed. But
nothing happens.
Let me qualify that as well. But let us reverse the roles very quickly for a bit. Let me just highlight the problem that might be there. There are 5 moving parts to it, this story, right? The first one, the accuser. The second one, social media, through which he has actually spreading whatever lies that might be. Then the women that were accused, right? Finally, there's talk of certain officials. Of course, this is also slander. And the 5th one is, the subscribers that keep on rising, right? The followers that are rising. So, can you identify which one is the biggest problem here, Sana?
Perhaps the followers.
No. Social media is not that, right? The gentleman who was spreading the lies, and of course, then the followers, right? They are
Reminds
the
me of a
problem.
Black Mirror episode.
Right, absolutely. And Black Mirror, Orwell, umpteen other, stories or entertainment projects have actually dealt with that. But my concern is that this gentleman, when Imran Khan Sahab was in power, was the apple of everybody's eye, right? And somehow, whosoever is a follower, there is a huge chunk that they got because they were, praising everybody. The same time, Sana, when people like you and me kept on losing our voices repeatedly. Why? Because we could not actually go to the extent that they would go to, project the ruler of that time. And this is the problem. Till that time, you keep on supporting such people. For example, I have the misfortune of going through his timeline, although I did not actually see the entirety of the videos. But at one place, he is projecting himself as the #1 soldier of fighting fifth generation warfare. Does it ring a bell? It does. Why? Because until the previous government, we were championing the cause that there is fifth generation. Amazingly, if somebody can take money from me and then become my warrior, he can take money from the other side as well.
Become theirs.
Right? And this is the problem. Why is it that people like that actually manage to escape, manage to actually root themselves in developed countries and then start these attacks, and then nobody can do anything. By the way, I don't know whether Kubra Khan is going to actually follow through with that case or not, but we know that one security official who was also slandered has actually moved courts in UK as well, and there's going to be a defamation law. Now, what we try to do is, the social media, because it is not based in Pakistan and because it is changing, ever changing, unfixed, and it has many shapes, right? You try to actually contain it through utensils and bottles, but the problem is in this country, because bureaucracy is highly conservative, in the end, it ends up compromising the freedoms of liberals, moderates, not the fanatics like this gentleman, right? In the end, you and I will be penalized, not them. So because of that, what is the best way forward? The best way forward is A, strengthening your defamation laws. Secondly, abandoning this habit of feeding such characters so that they become a problem to the challenge to the national security. And third, and of course, national, morale as well. And third is, of course, when you talk about these issues, help the courts to improve their conduct regarding defamation as well.
Absolutely.
If you can't make new courts, if you can have terrorism courts, then why can't you have, defamation courts as well?
Absolutely. And I really hope we move in that direction and we give enough priority to this. Thank you so much, Farrukh, for those views. And of course, with regards to what is needed, we really hope that we see the change both here and in terms of the security and economic challenges that we face. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.